Before I do start this video, make sure to use my TCG player affiliate down below if you're looking for any of these singles that I talk about today. Also, this channel is sponsored by Arcane Fortress. If you're looking for the best deck boxes around, make sure to use my link down below in the description to check them out. One other way you can support the channel is by becoming a patron. There are some great benefits of being a patron to the channel, such as giveaways, deck advice, and more when you do join. Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin coming back at you with another video today on PubStomp MTG, and in this video today, I'm going to discuss a deck tech around Dragonhawk Fate's Tempest. And so as a mono red commander, let's first read what it does. So for 3 and 2 red, it's a 5/5 body with flying. And whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, kind of like that Titan effect you usually see with those giants, exile the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of creatures you control with power 4 or greater. You may play those cards until your next end step. At the beginning of your next end step, Dragonhawk deals 2 damage to each opponent for each of those cards that are still exiled. So this seems pretty powerful. Obviously the goal of this deck is to have a lot of 4 power creatures on the battlefield. It will include itself when it enters the battlefield too, so if anything else, you'll at least exile 1 card. Let's just say, for example, you have like 5 creatures on the battlefield with power 4 or greater, and then you don't cast any of those cards, you're going to deal 10 damage to each of your opponents, which seems pretty powerful in that aspect as a burn commander. Of course, there are a lot of ways we could absolutely abuse its ability, but in a way, it's very cool because it acts as card draw, essentially, in the mono red version. There's definitely going to be a lot of great cards to add to this list, so without further ado, let's get it started. So let's first discuss the game plan of the deck. What are we trying to achieve with our commander? Of course, we want to enter the battlefield as much as we can and attack, so Arena of Glory is going to be perfect because we could enter the battlefield with our commander and also attack with it immediately. The only downside to Arena of Glory is the fact that it won't untap during your next untap phase. The benefit is going to outweigh the cost though, because it's just going to make our commander get haste, we're going to attack and swing in, we're going to exile double the cards. Obviously, depending on how much creatures with power 4 or greater we do have on the battlefield. But let's move on to one of the better cards in the deck. Party Thrasher is going to be insane in here. It doesn't have power 4, that's okay, because non-creature spells you cast from exile have Convoke. Also, at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you may discard a card. If you do exile the top 2 cards of your library, then choose one of them. You may play that card this turn. That's completely okay, though. If we need more card selection, we have that option, but having the ability to have non-creature spells you cast from exile have Convoke is going to be brilliant. You probably don't want to tap your commander when convoking, but there's probably other options that you have on the battlefield where you can convoke and make your spells cheaper. Another play from exile effect I did want to highlight is Wild Magic Sorcerer. This is absolutely incredible for the deck because the first spell you cast from exile each turn has Cascade. Because we are playing cards from exile, this is going to be absolutely perfect. We want to make sure that we can get more value out of that Cascade ability. Plus, it does have a power 4 or greater, so it will trigger with our commander. Because you are cascading from exile, you could essentially trigger some of your other spells too. The next card I do want to highlight, and I'm gonna totally butcher the name. I always butcher this name every time I bring it up, but Nalfshini. Not only is the art pretty provocative, it does have a pretty powerful ability, plus it does have power 4 or greater too, just to keep that in mind. Whenever you cast a spell from exile, you copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. If it's a permanent spell, the copy gains haste, and at the beginning of the next end step, sacrifice this permanent. This actually works pretty well with our commander if we're casting creature spells with power 4 or greater from exile. We can make an extra token copy of that 4 power or greater creature, then swing in with our commander, make more exile triggers happen, and then deal a lot of damage if we don't cast those spells. So this is just a great option of the deck, no question about it. The next card I do want to showcase for you is Lelia, the Blade Reforged. This is going to be absolutely disgusting for your deck. For 2 and a red, it does have haste, and whenever it does attack, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn, and whenever one or more cards are put into exile from library or in graveyard, put a 1/1 counter on Lelia, and it does have a 2/2 body. So let's go into a hypothetical situation again. Let's just say, for example, you have 5 total creatures on the battlefield that have power 4 or greater. You swing in with your commander, Lelia swings as well. Before combat damage, your commander will trigger, exiling the top 5 cards of your library. Lelia will also trigger, putting 5 1/1 counters on it. So that does seem pretty nutty. Also, Lelia will also trigger, exiling the top card of your library. So it's going to get even more huge. So with Lelia on the battlefield, it's going to just scale with the game depending on how much creatures you do have with power 4 or greater. But honestly, let's double the triggers of our commander. Let's focus on having Roaming Throw in the deck. This is just an easy auto include because you could just name Dragon or Bird. bird, and then double the trigger of your commander, exiling double the amount of cards from the top of your library and potentially dealing double the damage that you would normally do. So hooray, we broke Roaming Throne, not like it ever was broken beforehand. Also, because we are playing cards from exile, Delayed Blast Fireball is going to be an excellent include. Most likely we're never going to foretell it, we're just going to be playing it from exile. For 3 mana, we're going to deal 5 damage to each opponent and each creature they control, instead of that 2 damage. Speaking of burn, as the Mad King once said, burn them all, and of course we're going to do that with some cards like Passionate Archaeologist and Keeper of Secrets. Both of these have that kind of effect whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, or with Passionate Archaeologist, whenever you cast a spell from exile, they will deal damage equal to that spell's mana value to target opponent. Keeper of Secrets does have a high mana cost, but what's nice about it though is the fact that it does have power 4 or greater. It can trigger our commander when it enters the battlefield or attacks, and Passionate Archaeologist will only work if we do have our commander out on the battlefield, so I do like Keeper of Secrets a little better, even though Passionate Archaeologist is only 2 mana compared to the 6 mana. But when I first saw this commander, my mind immediately went to Flaming Tyrannosaurus, because I love dinosaurs, by the way, if you didn't know already. But it does have a pretty powerful ability. Even though it is 7 mana, it does have Menace 5/5 body. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, it deals 3 damage to any target that put a +1/+1 counter on Flaming Tyrannosaurus. And when it does die, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. So as a burn engine itself, it's pretty powerful. Just having that ability to just lightning bolt anything on the battlefield when you cast a spell, at least from exile, is going to be pretty powerful. Plus, not to mention, this is one of those cards that a lot of people want to remove but don't want to remove at the same time. I mean, a Swords of Plowshare will get the job done, but when it does die, it will deal damage equal to its power to each opponent. That is pretty scary depending on how much cards you did cast from exile. So most likely this is definitely killing one opponent on the spot for sure if they have a low life total. But why not increase the damage input our commander brings out with Ohur Ashneel and Sulfim Mayhem Dominus? With our commander's triggered ability dealing 2 damage to each opponent, it is a non-creature damage, so these will work perfectly with our commander. So instead of 2 damage to each of our opponents, it'll be 4 depending on how big Ohur Ashneel is, and we could double the damage with Sulfim, so these are each equally perfect in the deck. The same can also be said for Torbrand, Thane of Redfell. This is another great card on the deck, but it will focus on damage in total from a red source. With our commander swinging in, instead of dealing 5 damage, it will deal 7 damage to an opponent, and of course the same kind of thing with Sulfim and Ohur Ashneel. Instead of 2 damage, it'll deal 4 damage. So these can be pretty good win cons in the deck, but other win cons I did want to highlight are going to be absolutely terrifying for your opponents, especially the more we do swing in. We want to make sure we can get some extra combats. For example, Great Train Heist and Seize the Day are just a couple options that you can use. I just wanted to highlight these two. There's a lot of other ones that you can add into the list. So extra combats are great. The more we can swing in with our commander, get that extra combat, swing in some more, the more we can exile depending on how much creatures we do have on the battlefield with power 4 or greater. And if we don't cast those cards, that's okay, because then we'll just deal a lot of damage to our opponents and potentially win the game from there. So extra combats are pretty good. Another option I did want to highlight, if you want to go for a more high-powered degenerate way of winning the game, you can take advantage of everybody's favorite Dockside Extortionist and Cloudstone Curio with Dragonhawk. So Cloudstone Curio and Dockside Extortionist are a pretty well-known combo. You just need another creature to cast so that you could trigger Dockside to go back to your hand, and as long as you're making enough treasure to cast them both back and forth to get infinite treasure, then you can cast your commander from your command zone and then bounce Dockside Extortionist to your hand, recast Dockside, put Dragonhawk back to your hand, go back and forth until you exile basically your whole entire deck, or at least exile enough to where you can deal enough damage to kill your opponents. You don't need to get rid of your whole entire deck, but that's an option for you if you want to cast your whole entire deck. So of course you don't have to necessarily put this in your deck. The reason why I like to point these things out is to kind of push the commanders to its limits and see if you can win from a certain combo with the commander. But if you are playing in more of a casual setting, you probably don't need to use this combo at all, because most likely you're not playing Dockside Extortionist in a casual deck. But with that said, that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video on Dragonhawk Fate's Tempest. This is a pretty neat commander. I do like how it's a bird dragon. I don't know if a dragon from Tarkir just came here by accident and got transmogrified into a bird dragon. I'm not a lore expert, but this does look like it could be a dragon from Kolaghan having the 4 different wings and also having the name with it, Fate's Tempest. But I will say it's kind of cool to see a lot of different dragons come out. I mean, there's the bird dragon with Dragonhawk. There's also a couple years ago with a Phyrexian dragon. Then later on with a dinosaur dragon. Then we got an Eldrazi dragon with Haragast. So a lot of cool, neat things for sure. But let me know down below in the comments, what are your thoughts and opinions about Dragonhawk Fate's Tempest? I would love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. Do you plan on building it yourself, or do you plan on putting it in the 99 of some Mirim or other dragon deck? So with that said, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stomping by.